The Zambian government has issued statutory instrument number 4 of 2025 that effectively suspends a 15% export duty on precious stones and metals. In a statement, Secretary to Cabinet Felix Nkulukusa explains that the decision aims to help producers compete more effectively during international auctions. He adds that the removal of export duty will make Zambia's precious stones and metals more competitively priced on the global market. Now, this move is expected to boost investment in the mining sector, enhance foreign exchange earnings, and strengthen Zambia's position as a leading exporter of gemstones and minerals. On tonight's edition of Costa, we'll discuss the impact of this decision by government. My guests join me right after this. Thank you so much for joining us this evening on this week's edition of Costa with me, Costa Mwansa. You're watching us live on channel 271, that is on DSTV. We are on channel 20 on GoTV. We're streaming live on Facebook. It's Diamond TV Online, as well as Diamond Media Zambia. Also on YouTube, it's Diamond TV Zambia. My guest, the president of the Emerald and Semi-Precious Stones Mining Association of Zambia, Mr. Victor Kalesha, as well as the Information and Publicity Secretary of the Federation of Small-Scale Miners Association of Zambia, Mr. Fabian Chewe. We'll discuss the suspension of export tax on precious stones and metals. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to host you on Costa this evening, and welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure.
Good to be with you, Costa.
Thank you so much. I think before we get into the discussions surrounding this new SI, Zambia, in large part of history, has been known and described globally as a copper export country. But for us as Zambians, we know that beyond copper, there's more that this country is endowed with in terms of minerals, emeralds and precious stones. Let's begin with a classification of what really comprises a precious stone.
I think, if we have to go by precious stones, those are the ones that are usually used in cutting and polishing to make jewelry. And if we are to categorize, like in Zambia, we have the most precious one is emerald, but we still have others. I think in aquamarine, that's categorized in precious, and we have others, the red garnet, amethyst, and citrine, many other more. They are semi-precious stones.
Interesting.
Because of value, I think the value that is attached to every stone, that is what classifies it as the precious. The precious ones are much higher than the semi-precious.
Now, obviously, you, Mr. Kalesha, president of the Emeralds and Semi-Precious Association, you know, Mr. Chewe, you're coming from the Federation of Small-Scale Miners. Why is it that with all this endowment, we only seem to have some sort of semblance within copper mining, where we're seeing huge investments in terms of copper mining, issues surrounding a proper tax policy and a tax regime? Why don't we see this in the emerald sector, when some of these actually fetch far much higher even than a tonnage of copper?
Maybe before the IPS comes in, I'm from the emerald sector. And if you say, why is it that we are seeing much of, I think, is it development, even investment in the copper sector than the gemstone or the emerald sector? One, the usage of copper is vast. There is a lot of usages that you do. Cables, you do a lot of things with copper, and that's why it attracts much of the investment. But when it comes to precious stones and semi-precious stones, it is basically luxury, and luxury for jewelry. That's why it is there. So many people, investors that would want to come and invest, they would look at, where do we get like the market for if we started mining the emeralds? Market for emeralds is very, very restricted. Very few countries buy these emeralds. The major buyers are Indians, because that's where they've been doing value addition, cutting and polishing for generations. And the Indians themselves, they have the clientele of where to take to sell the cut and polished stones, which is also very limited. You would find like in US, Israel, Dubai, and very limited countries do buy the value-added products. So this is the reason why you see the copper attracts much more investment than the emeralds. And mining of copper is far much easier. When you just find a deposit, wherever it is, you are able to define how much you make, the price, the price at the London stock market, and the whole body that is there, you are able to define how much you make in the next 10 years. It's not like with emeralds or any other semi-precious stones. So
are you then saying that despite this endowment, one, there is no global demand for precious, metals, hence we cannot create a sector and an industry around this? Is it a problem of demand? Or lack of industry thereof?
Well, let me come in. I think the question addresses. I can address that question in a number of ways. Number one, as Victor alluded to earlier, we discover that copper industry is a well-structured industry in terms of the industrial usage of copper is vast. You're talking of using copper in electrical cars. You're talking of using copper in terms of housing. You're talking of using copper in terms of electrical appliances. There are so many uses of copper on the industrial level, and the value chains that are in copper are just too vast. As compared to the same precious stones or to the precious metals, we are talking about something that you attach what we call sentimental or ornamental value. For instance, wearing a diamond ring, wearing an amethyst, bracelet. You find that those are people's preferences, and in terms of how they view life and how they'll be viewed by others who see them wearing those ornamental issues. So we find that the limitation lies in who has the earning power, who has the capacity to spend money for him to actually get into buying the gemstones, as opposed to the metal, which is an industrial use and a requirement for every person in the world for you to actually power life, power electricity, and all these issues that are required. So there is nothing like, in terms of saying there's no market for gemstone industry. The market does exist, but the market is segmented in such a way that there are people who require the purchase of that gemstone, and those who require the gemstone are people who are in the higher earning income bracket.
For the sake of clarity, and I think you are the experts here, how then do we classify, for example, things like gold, things like diamond? And where I'm going is this: are these precious stones, or are these valuable stones to be categorized within the organized setup of demand and industry like copper? There's lots of comparisons. For example, when this SI was announced, there were people analyzing, saying, why do we as Zambians always pass policies that make us lose out? Look at how Botswana, for example, just last week they announced that they had increased their stake about 0.5%, which increases their stake in Deb Botswana to about 30% within their diamond aspect. Diamond is not copper. In a layman's sense, it's like a precious stone. So help us clarify. Zambia has gold, Botswana has diamonds, for example. Then people will be saying, why is Botswana doing far much better in organizing its diamond, while we can't organize our emeralds, our gold, our sugilite, our manganese?
Okay, let's make a clear-cut distinction between what is precious metals and base metals. For instance, copper is actually a base metal. It's not a precious metal. But talking of diamond and gold, these are precious metals, meaning that they carry the same ornamental and aesthetic value. When I say aesthetic value, I mean what really makes a person feel important when they're wearing a diamond ring, or when they're wearing a diamond, or a gold chain, or a gold necklace. So in that category, it's clear that when we are trying to make a clear-cut distinction to say the taxation for the base metal is so much, and the taxation for the gemstone industry and precious metal is so much, we're trying to make a clear-cut distinction for those that occur in abundance. Because copper is so in tons and tons of copper for which will rise value. Even, I think it has come to the public notice that every time we're announcing the price of copper, we are saying per metric ton. But when announcing the price for gold, when gold is mentioned in carats, in grams, and all those, so those distinctions that must be made, the public must be aware of. But what is more important, that in all these, a country must be able to earn value out of it. And there's this narrative that we have the proponents who are saying, well, Zambia is not getting maximum value from its mineral resources. It's a school of thought which is really gaining currency in the country. And then you have those who are saying...
Is it not a true one, or is it not a logical or a useful school of thought?
No. The answer is yes and no. And I'll probably Victor and I will justify those positions. Number one, you must understand, yes, we need to get value from what we get. Zambia, God decked this country with all the mineral resources, all mineral value. Why was Zambia placed on this particular piece of land? Is because the value, the mineral that deck our continent, our country, Zambia, are to be realized by the people who live in this country in terms of benefiting from those minerals. But at the same time, note that when countries are created, they are created with international norms and laws and regulations on how we govern our trade, our commerce, and everything. So Zambia is not an island. So when we create policies and create laws, know that another country is also creating laws and policies, mercantile laws that affect your business and operations. So you have to be able to balance between these international and local interests. Yes, Zambia has been taxing. From the time we started mining gold and copper, we pay tax. If you talk of the big mines, they are paying 30% in terms of income tax. They are paying 6% on mineral royalty tax. So the small scale miners have got 4% presumptive tax that is paid, and also they have 6% on mineral royalty tax. So there's nothing like Zambia not paying tax. There's this narrative going around that no, there are no taxes being paid. They have reversed all the taxes. Taxes are being paid.
No,
but the question, we must balance the interest of flexibility and the interest of stability. Do you kill the goose that lay golden eggs? No, we can't kill the goose that lay golden eggs.
Granted, before we come to the issue of tax contributions, I'll still go back to the analogy I gave. Now that you've clarified that unlike a base metal like copper, which is quantified in metrics of tons, and gold in carats and grams, granted, you've clarified that. The question then is, why have we failed, or have we done some sort of study or feasibility like is happening for copper to check how much of deposits we have, what is the lifespan? We seem to be doing this small-scale, cooperative, uncoordinated business with gold. I mean, look at South Africa, for example. They are mining gold and making it as a country with gold. I've given an example of Botswana. Why should we fail when we have gold in Zambia? We have all these issues, emeralds, sugilite, gemstones. Why can't we make it a proper industry?
I think before we confuse ourselves, when it comes to mining, in terms of gemstones, because here we are in gemstones, I'm more experienced in emerald mining.
Yes.
The dynamics of emerald mining, any kind of mineral, are so much different. And if we want to compare other countries in the terms of mining gold and other precious minerals, in Zambia's, first I have to stick to emerald. the mining of emeralds in Zambia, where you say we are able to define, and because there are these artisanal, and many times you hear people say there is a lot of dormant mines, small scale are dormant, and the question that, Costa, you should ask even yourself is, why is it that for a very long time we still have very few people that are investing into the emerald industry? The answer is...
That's the question you should answer.
Yes. The answer is simple. The reason is that emerald mining is a high-risk business, and the cost of mining emerald is very excessive. And, the truth is, until today, there is no machine, because people think mining emerald is just you go, you scoop, and start extracting. You have to do... One, there is what they call magnetic surveys and radiometric surveys, which will give you anomalies. Let's talk about, this is the land that you are doing exploration. And the anomalies it gives you is magnetic picks up the quartzite in this, and all this, there is nothing, it's just the ground. When you depict this quartzite that is in there, and it only tells you there are possibilities that you can find emeralds in here, so you start doing core drilling. You start drilling holes like, 1 meter drilling of a hole is about $200. So you drill a couple of holes, and then it will give you where you meet the anomalies, which tells you here you can find emerald. It does not give you that surely you will find emerald here. It only gives you like the quartzite thing, which you picked, because emerald is quartz. It only changes color. So when you get to where you see the anomalies, then you start removing the waste. For you to get 1 gram, though those are stripping ratios, 1 gram of emerald, you have to strip about 1,000 tons of waste. And when you get there, you find this pocket of emerald, which you do not know whether you find high grade or low grade, but quite all right, you find it. And then you start stockpiling, you find here in areas. So let's say, for instance, you find your emerald here, a pocket of emerald, and where you are finding it, it's about 30 to 50 meters, 30 meters. So you have to remove the whole 30 meters of the waste before you get that. So this is where, it becomes very difficult for people to invest in. We had Chinese that had come in here, about 10, more than 10 Chinese companies that came because they thought all of them have run away. We are remaining with one company, and also it's partnering with the Chinese. So Chinese, or any other business person, including yourself, you would want to immediately you put in the money. 1 month after or 2 months after, you want to start making your recoveries of, but you would find that people have been mining for 6 months and they've never gotten.
So make us understand, where is the capital intensity? Is it in exploration or mining or both?
Both.
And again, you need to forgive me, I'll ask on behalf of the layman because of these narratives on the ground. I started by asking you a classification because for a viewer out there, when you talk sugilite, you talk manganese, we'll say all these are precious metals. So you hear even legislators say, this government has stolen. Where has all the sugilite, gone? Mr. Kalesha says there's no investment, but you hear that there's Indians, there's Chinese in the bush partnering with local cooperatives, partnering with local small-scale miners. Why would a Chinese, why would an Indian come all the way to Zambia, Mr. Kalesha, Mr. Chewe, if there is no money, there is no profit, and there's no viability in this business?
Take it, Mr. Chewe. Although we didn't say there is no viability, I think Mr. Chewe...
and I speak basically with the narrative on the ground. You've heard, for example, in the sugilite, we are told these deposits are done. Do we know how much deposits of emeralds and other precious metals we have? But even the viability. Why are we seeing pockets of illegality within this sector?
Okay, it's a mouthful question. Let me try to attempt on the aspect of investors coming to a country, of course, with a focus to ensure that when they invest, they're going to get a return on their investments. And let's bear in mind that the exploration and the mining of the precious stones is mainly done by the foreigners. Why? It's because within our own locality, within the country, Zambia, we don't have deliberate, sovereign wealth funds that we can use to actually deliberately invest in these expensive mining venture, which Victor alluded to earlier. That the mining, activity is a very expensive venture. It may require a lot of resources for you to hit the jackpot or to hit actually the vein where you're going to get the mineral deposits. So the people coming in the country have an understanding that there's something that exists in Zambia. Life has been made easier in terms of geological survey. We have a geologist who are able to survey and be able to tell with a high level of certainty and precision that here there is gold, here there is emerald, or here there is precious stones. Now, what is required, the next step to ensure that now people move in, begin to mine that product, and then sell to the external market. The challenge we are facing, as he has rightly put that, is expensive to mine. It's not something that you're going to say, I will invest today and tomorrow I'm going to get a return. That's why I find it's very easy, Costa, for the government to invest into FISIP because the rains start from December and ends in March, and between there our bags of meal. Very easy to predict in terms of agriculture, but in mining it may not be the case. You may start in December at the time someone is starting the cultivating his field, but for you are going to see production maybe after 2 years. He has harvested 3 farming seasons, and you haven't even reached where you're supposed to get the deposit. So it requires a lot of patience in terms of how much investment are going. That's why when people are saying that no, we are not reaping benefit from this country, bear in mind the people who are investing in this sector have invested a lot of money for them to get that production. So it may require that we have to look at the aspect of ensuring that we empower ourselves and empower the local people to participate into this mining venture. I'll tell you for a fact, Costa, that 96% of the people that have these mining licenses are Zambians, and only 4% are foreigners in the gemstone sector. I would like to categorize it that way. So you're looking at an industry which is locally dominated but economically depressed. Why? It's because you have no access to financing for you to actually move into this venture.
With that late, most of these artisanal miners are made to believe forming in cooperatives and the association. So again, Mr. Kalesha, I know you want to add, how does it happen? I go apply for a license. What does that license entitle me to explore? Because from what you're saying, it's like I'm taking a risk, or for lack of a better term, a gamble. Is it first that I know that there's minerals here, then I come and get a license, or I get a license, permission to go and explore? So either I find or I don't find, but I've still already started my risk journey of applying for a license to explore, then begin to mine.
Yeah, you get a license, like in our situation in the Emerald area, in Lufanyama Emerald Restricted Area. Way back, what happened was, I think there was... when you had the Julas, the Gokams, and those times the Senegalese, and when the emeralds were like, found like anyhow, it was meant to be like that. I think there were some deposits at some place where the volcano erupted quite much, and the emeralds were like on the upper side. So when Dr. Kenneth Kaunda saw the people taking emeralds and selling to Senegalese in Kitwe and all these other foreigners, he actually called for the stop to that, called a cleanup, and declared Lufanyama as a restricted area. And after declaring Lufanyama as a restricted area, he asked people to form cooperatives and get licenses that they can officially or legally start mining. By then, there was also this Kajam, the area at Kajam, which was called Mindeko small-scale mine, is run by the government. And when Dr. Kaunda ordered that people should get cooperatives, he meant that the Mindeko small-scale mines will be helping the small-scale miners in getting resource to develop their mines. And that Mindeko small-scale mines was eventually turned into Kajam Mining Limited, which was run 100% by the Zambian government then. Then these other small tenements, cooperatives that were formed, everyone rushed into there because there was that rush of emerald of those. And even when you have a tenement which you you don't know where you find. We were all mining. That's why you find in the emerald restricted area there are many open holes that people have been trying to find. Reason, we were doing that without exploration, and the government were just, our Ministry of Mines was just giving out. Come, you want a license, you qualify, you get, and you go, you start mining, and you find that a lot of people wasted a lot of money. In Kajam also, emeralds were there, but they were running at a loss because they were just mining also like just anybody else. So when they were not finding enough until Gemfields came, bought shares into Kajam, and they started exploration. Their first exploration that they did for a couple of years, they spent about $188 million. It's in public domain, you're able to see that. $108 million. And after doing the exploration, then they started doing organized mining. Grizzly also, when they saw that, I think what Kajam did in going into exploration, they also started exploration, and they spent over $60 million. That's how now they started at least now getting enough to be able to get even a profit. Kajam Mining started making a profit, I think 5 years after doing now proper exploration, and they started proper mining. Equally, Grizzly Mining, when they started, all this time they were mining and they were getting some emeralds, but they were not getting much of the profits until they did a proper. So now, why you hear that the small-scale miners are dormant, and what is not, they've been dormant, they've tried, they've been mining, and we are still mining. Like for me, I continue, and I feel one day I'll still get there. I eventually got to do about 10 holes of 50 meters plus. I found somebody who helped me to do that, and we proved that it's a potential project. We can go ahead. But everyone else in the small-scale mining, like Mr. Cheo put, where are they going to get the resource? Nowhere. So it's a high potential, high risk, high rewarding project, depending on how you carry out your exploration and your investigations in the long term.
Mr. Kalesha talks about a gap in exploration. Government now is talking about cleaning up the cadastre they talk about, and they're saying they're launching a new cadastre. They've launched through the president their aerial mapping surveys of trying to use AI technology now, and the companies that they've brought. Is this extending also to your field, or this is only copper? If it's not, I'm talking about the answer you've just given with the history, that people were just, either there was no exploration or they were just shooting in the dark. Is there hope of cleaning up the sector so that you don't make a loss, you simply hit the bullseye?
Yes.
We have a map for the emerald, which was done, is it early 70s or early 80s, Mr. Cho? That map that which shows actually the veins, which actually is now outdated.
Yes.
We are hoping that with these aerial surveys that they've conducted, if they have covered the emerald area, would have a new kind of, with the new technology, because the technology they used then was outdated technology. So with the latest technology, we hope the veins will now again be redefined and shown where they pass. I know that there is a vein that passes through my mind and others that are closer to me. But for you to know the depth of where the emeralds are, that's what we don't know as yet. They call drilling. This brings me, because we are talking about small scale. In Tanzania, what happened was that the president, before President Magufuli died, they sat with the small-scale miners. How do we develop this sector? So one they complained about was the taxes, and they brought down the taxes to 7.1% for everything, mineral royalty, what. And then he promised them, what is your major challenge? It's lack of geological information. Then he promised to get you geological equipment at small scale. And when he died, the lady president took it up, and they bought 15 exploration equipment for the small scale and gave them in every areas. Before you start mining, you are given a license, and those that already have licenses do the exploration so that you define your mining activities. If you go to Tanzania now, you find that the small scale are putting much more into the treasury because of they are now mining as organized people with information. We continue mining without proper information.
Why can't that happen in Zambia? What has happened in Tanzania? Why can't it happen what has happened in Botswana?
That's why the federation...
You've got a federation, you've got an association.
Exactly.
Is government not giving you a table?
Mr. Chair.
That's a real question. I thought Victor would continue on that one, but okay, let me chip in. So here's the issue. I think you spoke about cadastre being cleaned, which probably will come through what they call the Mineral Regulation Commission, under which all these licensing will be done under that umbrella. There's an act of parliament to that effect, which is actually in its formation. But what we're looking at, number one, ensure that the sector is formalized. One of the things that is required, number one, urgently be done, is geological mapping in terms of knowing where the deposits are found. It's very critical for us to know that Eastern Province has deposits of aquamarine, gold, I mentioned all these, moonstone, things to do with red garnet and all these.
This is what I'm asking, Mr. Chair, just chip in. This current area mapping, does it include your sector?
It does include. It's actually a very comprehensive exercise that involves mapping the whole country in terms of where all the mineral deposits are found and the same precious stones,
base metals
and everything, to ensure that people can actually do mining, like you say, it's the bullseye. You can know exactly where you're found. Because what happened, they're using what they call area mapping. You are using the satellites, and so the satellite technology helps you to. It can beam and know exactly here there's gold, here there's what. Here. The old way of doing things, we're using what they call magnetic maps, which he spoke about, the magnetic maps to say the whole area around Lufanyama or Ruondo, restricted area. Much of what shows there is that there's a presence of emeralds. So in other parts of the world, you may also find emerald, except that predominantly and for many years we have only known the copper belt to be the one that is having an emerald. So this exercise will allow us to actually have a panoramic and aerial view of the whole country to understand where minerals are found so that we can mine responsibly. You know what happens, Costa? If you're able to know that this area has emeralds, or this area has amethyst, this area has conundrum or topaz, or mention any kind of precious stones, you are able to compute what are called mining rights. Mining rights is actually the number and the quantity of deposits that are found in that area. So, for instance, I say in this area there is almost about 2,000, 2,000, kg or maybe 2 trillion kg of amethyst. Then multiply by the international market. How much is it selling today? I say it's selling at maybe at $3. I multiply by that one. It computes what are called the mining rights for that area. You can know that this area is commercially viable to do the mining. But without having that geological information, it's very difficult. People are just doing guesswork when they go for mining. So I mean that exercise will help us to be able to compute the mining rights and assign the right value of the mine, and so that it can attract investors to come and invest in that area. Because they will know for sure that as I'm coming here, so much quantity of copper is found here, so much quantity of emerald is found here, so much quantity of amethyst is found here, and therefore as I'm investing, I'll have a return on my investment.
Gentlemen, again, for the longest, this country has had several debates around the best metals, copper especially, on how do we mine and tax copper profitably. We've moved from issues of mineral royalty to scale to graduated tax to output tax, confusion around VAT refunds, non-deductibility, and so on. It's always copper, copper, copper. And right now, again, under this administration, we're seeing a lot of FDI in the investments in the nickel mine, Vedanta coming back, because we've suddenly gotten it right. 13 tax or policy changes around that much in a space of about 9-10 years. For the sake of enlightening the viewers, Mr. Kalesha, Mr. Chewe, you said in Tanzania, the president sat with the small-scale miners and looked at the bottlenecks. Among them was taxes. What are the challenges apart from exploration do you face within the taxation regime?
Okay, let me read that one. We know very well, Costa, that government revenue, number one, comes from exports. Number two is tax revenue. So being number two in the order of priority where money comes from to run the government business, you know that there's a lot of attention given to tax. And we have said, and Ruth and I are coming from the ZRA tax conference. One of the things that we have said is that there must be a predictable policy environment. Have a predictable policy environment whereby we know for sure that if you're going to invest into the mining sector, we know the kind of different taxes that exist in that sector. And there are also what we call non-taxing factors that we can talk about which have to do with the issues of licensing and other issues. But on the issue of tax, yes, we have never had a predictable tax environment in this country.
Including in your sector, because that's been the same cry in the base metals. I think policy seems...
Precisely. I'll give you a good example, Costa. We are paying 6% of mineral royalty tax. That is regardless whether you're a large-scale mining or a small-scale mining. We're all paying the 6% mineral royalty tax. For instance, if you remember very well, when we privatized the mines in 2000, during the MMD administration, one of the things that you recall very well that the tax on mineral royalty tax, which is a production-based tax, was at 0.6%. In 2008, when we were reviewing the development agreements that we had with these mine owners, we were able to actually graduate from 0.6% to 3%. Fast forward, in 2012, we had a new government that came into place and pushed the mineral rate to 6%. There are studies that have been done by policy institutes and other international agencies that say that the 6% was not sustainable in terms of pushing the industry forward for us to actually anchor the investment and be able to reap harvest in future. So what you are saying right now is that the small-scale miners are taxed at 6% in terms of mineral royalty tax, the small-scale miners. The big mines are also at 6%. I'm not saying that it's good for both. We all complain. But what is more important is that the tax that you introduce in the country should be able to bear, number one, the intended outcome in terms of maximizing revenue. But much of that revenue is not coming through because these mines are predominantly having what I call low-level investments.
So there's not a perception, but there is an atmosphere of mistrust. And let me qualify this mistrust in that Zambian citizens believe that God has blessed them with mineral wealth in this country. And people like yourselves, Mr. Kalesha, Mr. Chiwe, who are involved in this, worse off if you partner with foreign investors. They're only out there to loot and rip the country of its mineral wealth. And so, unlike copper, in fact, we are told that things like gold and emeralds just sneak out. We've got planes landing and metals are being picked by people from farms and so on. On the other, this mistrust is on the aspect that yes, we have a tax authority in ZRA, but do they have the capacity to understand these challenges, these dynamics and complexities? So the question here is to get the viewers to understand, educate us, how does ZRA even arrive at charging this 6% in the case of small-scale miners? Do they inspect your mines? Is it upon just declaration? Do they understand the mix? Because for the big mines now, the argument has always been that they're under-declaring their cost of input, yet ZRA has to overpay the VAT refunds. Somebody is stealing from the other.
I think not talking on behalf of the base metals, because the big mines you talk about is, I think, many of these base metals. In the gemstone sector, the major players that we have currently, it's Grizzly and Kajam. Would include Prigem, which is also a subsidiary of Grizzly, and the dotted other small-scale miners. The problem that has been there and which is there is there are a lot of misconceptions and misunderstanding of people about the sector. Because if really we want to compare copper mining and gemstone, I like talking about emerald because that's the high-value stone that we are talking about. If we compare those and the comparison, we would find that that's an unfair comparison, because in emerald mining, like I gave the statistics, the dynamics are so much different with the base metals. And you know, the misconception that we really wanted people to understand and make clear to the Zambian people is that they felt when this 15% tax was suspended by the Minister of Finance, everybody felt, I heard, politicians, opposition going all around, they have removed the taxes, meaning won't be getting anything. Far from the truth. That government has never made money from the 15% that was introduced in 2019 and reintroduced in December 2024. Government has always been making money from the mineral royalties from the gemstone sector. Now, taking into account the cost of mining emeralds, ZRA has been, we've invited in the past ourselves as a sector, ZRA, Minister of Finance, and all these members of parliament, both from the opposition and the ruling. And there is a committee at parliament called Committee on National Economy and Labour. So come and see how we do it. Some of them were very quite surprised. How do you survive, you guys? Because they saw trucks and trucks for the 2 hours that we were there, moving out, taking out the overburden, trying to chase for one pocket of emerald. So the only avenue where ZRA gets revenue from this sector is through the mineral royalty, and like Mr. Chewa said, from the presumptive tax for small scale, yes, and the 30% corporate tax by the large scale mine. If we have to go by, because I think this is what people should have wanted, would love to be hearing, or people should be taught by those that are criticizing. From 2015 to date, the records are there at ZRA, Costa. You are very conversant in doing things. You can go and check. The sector collectively, as to the small scale and the large scale, we paid 7 billion kwacha to the National Treasury. In terms of export duty? In mineral royalties. Okay. Mineral royalties and corporate tax and presumptive tax. Not the 15%. The 15% was never, it was effected, but if you saw, after being effected from 1st January, for some time, there were no exports that were going through. You could have checked through Geological Survey, they will tell you that there was less exports because people now were confused. This 15%, what it entailed was that you have to pay before you go, you get into the plane, you have to leave the value. Let's say, for instance, your emeralds are worth $2 million. You have to pay 15% before you even go. Now, the snag there is... But how was that being calculated before it is sold? There's valuation. That's why any gemstones or any kind of... Before they go out of the country, you have to take them for valuation. You take them for... You get an export permit. Then you take them to... Geological Survey. There is a department that does the valuation, and because there should be a figure. What is it that you are taking out to go and sell out of the country? There should be a figure. What was the challenge? Why you were? I believe you were opposed to this, but on the other hand, were you consulted? We're talking about predictability. What was the rationale behind introducing this export duty, the 15%?
Okay, that's a very good question. I don't want to crucify ZRA on Thursday before Friday, but even tomorrow they can't be crucified because we have had this open discussion with them, and they have decided to actually, step back and advise government to actually not move on the 15%. The reason is simple. What we spoke about, that there was no consultation. The industry was not consulted. This traces back to 2018 when the 15% was introduced on exports. We had a lot of engagement with government, the vice president, having meetings with so many government officials, ensure that they actually look at what challenges that was going to impose on the sector should they go ahead with the introduction of the 15% export on gemstones. The same thing happened. Fast forward in 2024, government introduces 15% tax on exports. look, let me say 15% is a stillborn baby. It has never been implemented to its fullest extent to say that this is how much we can compute, this is how much revenue we have lost. No, it was going to be introduced, but we as the sector said, well, wait a minute, before you introduce, have you consulted us? Do you know the challenges that we are going through as a sector in terms of lumping the 15% on us? This is going to depress the sector and going to rob us of the much needed job that we need to create in the sector should we go ahead with this, because predominantly 96% of those who are having these mining licenses are not even able to hit the target of 800,000 annual turnover. So if you're going to introduce 15%, you're always saying that we are now winding the clock backwards. That's turnover tax, which is if you are hit 800, or below, you're taxed at 4% presumptive tax. So they haven't reached that level. This is 96% of the people that are in the gemstone sector. Forget about the 4% Victor was talking about. That is about, there are about 3 players. I think he talked of Kajam and Grizzly Mining and Pride Gem, which is I think that's a conglomerate. It's under a company called Grizzly Mining. So we can count them as one. And so if you're going to just squeeze these 2 mines to pay 15% and over the 96% who are not able to afford, what are you doing? You're going to kill the goose that lay golden eggs. Because for the big mining companies, I'm not really an advocate for them because I'm speaking for the small scale miners, but here's one thing that I can give them to their benefit. You find that they are paying 30% income tax, and on top of that you are lumping 15% on them, and also mineral tax 6%. The taxes go up to 55%. And if you make a comparison in the region and across the globe, no country is able to pay those kind of taxes. The challenge we have in this part of the world is that the only sector that can be overtaxed is the mining sector.
So the other school of thought that are proponents of this export duty obviously believe that this tax was introduced to prevent exploitation and capital flight, ensuring that the wealth and resources obviously are captured, that there's so much illegal exportation. So on one hand, the removal of this, won't this decision just make it harder now for government to really regulate and monitor exports, potentially leading to smuggling and other reporting of mineral sales?
I think what could have led to the smuggling of stones and would have been if this 15% was sustained. If it was kept and say, this would have resulted in many people, especially the small players, would have resorted into wanting to export illegally, because if you look at paying 15% even before you export, and these stones, what happens with the gemstones, when you take them out of the country, it's not obvious that you are going to sell. The president is seated in there, Mr. Mwansa. He goes to Tucson for the past over 15 years. He's been going to Tucson, the biggest gemstone fair in the world. And every time he takes out the stones, or the gemstones that he takes, he mines citrine in Mansa. And every time he takes, sometimes he does not sell. Now, you have already paid 15%. And then when you come back, you haven't sold, you leave them. Because I even went to his warehouse last year when I went to, there was a couple of gemstones that he has not sold. Because maybe that time there's not the market for it. So it would have, the smuggling would have happened if this 15% would have stayed. One other thought is that Zambia is not the only country that mines emeralds. We have several other more countries. So this 15% as it came, there was also the 6% mineral royalty. There is also 4% presumptive tax, reaching 25%. We have countries like Brazil and Colombia, whose taxes, mineral royalty, are between 2.5 and 3%. Okay? Costa, you are the Zambian emeralds where you are paying 25% tax. And if I also need to make a profit, when I take it to the buyer out there or I'm auctioning my emeralds, I would want to increase the price a bit. The customers will start complaining, the Zambian emeralds have become too expensive. They will still run back to to Brazil and Colombia, because they've maintained their prices because of lower tax. Let me finish just this thought very quickly. So you cannot, and also you cannot, transfer your problems with your government on taxes to the buyer. Because you have increased your prices, the buyer would go somewhere else.
But the question for both of you then is, are you refusing to play by the laws? And what I mean is, certainly when you are in business and you sell something, you've earned income. And you need to pay something to government when you've made a sale, whether it's income tax or it's a sales tax. So could it be that you're in support of the fact that you're supposed to pay a tax on the sale, but probably not just the 15%, it's too much? Because in itself, isn't it an illegality that you just want to be doing businesses as miners to be exporting, yet you don't want to pay for the sales that you make? Mr. Chair.
No, that's not true, Costa. The question is, every law-abiding citizen is supposed to pay tax. What we are talking about is the prohibitive costs. That is, yes, it's too high. I'll give a very good example. Mr. Kalesha has really is trying to walk through the taxes that are existing in the small-scale miners in a bracket. Number one, I've got 6% minority tax. You've got 4% presumptive tax. Slap on it 15% tax. You come to 25% taxes. What we are seeing there is that these are taxes that are being lumped on without even selling the product. So in other words, I can classify them as production-based tax, which means if they're production-based tax, they are to your cost of production.
As long as you're registered by ZRA and captured, you need to be paying those taxes, whether you're producing or not.
Correct. So now,
whether you're selling or not, right?
Yes, whether you're selling or not. So it means now they become production-based taxes. Before you even sell, you have to meet those. You have to meet 25%. As he's saying, the copper industry is very predictable. You wake up today, the London Metal Exchange will tell you that today we are selling copper at 8,000 per metric ton. But for emerald and amethyst and garnet, it's not like that. You have to go literally looking for the market where you can sell. And you arrive and say, no, this year, I think we are only buying garnets. I'm not buying any of these products. So it means now they will remain. The market is completely dampened. Probably the year you're going to be selling will be about 3 or 2 years from now. So that makes it very, very, very difficult to slap 15% on the export on precious stones. Because the challenge there that the market is not readily available. You have to literally go sniffing around the globe to look for that market. Willing buyer, willing seller, at a time when the seller is willing to get that stone.
So then how do we bring about stability? How do we bring about predictability that you've spoken about? Because previous experiences in this country has shown a lot of policy reversals in the mining sector. And then to you, Mr. Kalesha, coming from the copper belt, we seem not to understand where we're going, and we seem to be coming backwards. I remember a few years back in Ndola and the President Levi Mwanwasa's regime, somewhere near the trade fair grounds, lapidaries were put there, and we were told all the gemstones on the copper belt, they'll be cut and polished there, just like Botswana is doing. There's infrastructure now that seemingly there was Zambia Development Agency. Fast forward, we're told now that you miners and Kajem will be auctioning these things in hotels, and buyers would come to Zambia rather than you going to look for your own buyers. Why are these inconsistent? What is really going on, probably, is the question.
I think, I remember you talked about the sub-Sahara, some gem exchange. I don't want to dwell into that because there are a lot of dynamics involved. But for the cutting and polishing, the value addition, there is a school in Ndola, a very good school, that are doing very good cutting. They did cut a ring for me. This is a citrine, and the problem that is there, we are not yet ready, fully ready for value addition, because one, we have no consumption for cut stones in this country. Because when you are adding value, the consumption should start from you, and then you export the excess. Why is it that India are far much ahead of us? India have been cutting and polishing stones generation after generation. They pass on the skill. Now, Costa, I remember you, I think we were together at Sierra 2 years ago for the second public private-public dialogue, when the president pronounced that 20% of all emeralds produced should remain in the country for value addition. Now, as a person, because sometimes we are looked at as supporting the big guys, when that pronouncement was made, I personally felt we are beginning from somewhere. So what are we going to do with these 20% emeralds? If we had had dialogue probably with the president, we would have made proposals to say, don't just give them outrightly to the Zambians. Let's hire some Indians, some of the Indians, put them in that school.
Are you saying you have no dialogue? Because we only see these mining indabas. We had a mining indaba in October, the president was opening. We had one in Cape Town recently. All this is copper. Are you not being identified as a sector?
I think what
is PPDF not securing government interface with you?
What we would have loved ourselves is to have a one-on-one with the president, where, like I told you about the Tanzania, where they are sitting with they sat there all day, and they proudly boast about that. We sat there all day with the president, and he did not allow any government official from the Ministry of Mines from anywhere to say anything. He only allowed the small-scale miners, everyone to be saying and recorded, and decisions were made just here and then. So what we are saying, we've never been given an opportunity. We know the president is very proactive in terms of listening and understanding things. We know when we speak to him certain things, he will be able to understand and implement them. But we have ideas that we cannot pass on to the marketer of the country. So if we are given that opportunity, I think we'll be able to give our proposal. I'm talking about the 20% emeralds remaining in the country. One, I felt that we could have had 10% put into the school with bringing in maybe the Indians who start working together with the Zambians, and they pass on the expertise. So even when those Indians would leave, the expertise would have passed on, and these that will get the knowledge will start passing on, and then will become generation to generation passing on the skills, and then at some point we will get to have that expertise that we may have been required, and then we'll get to the level of even exporting, because they know these guys are very good because they got this expertise from the Indians. The 10%, I've always said, Costa, I don't know, we have no single reserve of an emerald in the Bank of Zambia.
But governments, no matter the party, must be governments of continuation. So what is the status quo? What is happening to that proposed gem exchange in Ndola? And why don't we have auction houses in the country?
Okay, let me just add my thought. I think Victor will come in.
And you can also write on it.
Yeah. There's something that Victor mentioned as regard to the issues of value addition. I think that's what we've been talking about. We need value addition in our minerals, value addition on gemstone. Yeah, that is the right call, and it's the right song sung at the right time. The question that we need to ask ourselves is that, do we have the capacity to actually bring innovation in terms of adding value to our minerals? That's a question that we need to answer. What Victor was saying is very correct and spot on. Every time our gemstones that have been cut from Ndola or elsewhere in the country, they go on the international market, the first thing they say, this is a local cut or a native cut. They are designated as native cuts, meaning that they are saying that they don't meet the international standards. So what Victor was saying is that we need to actually be able to import the technical know-how on how to do the cutting from the consumers of the product. Well, when they see how this cut has been done, they'll say this is an Indian cut, or this is a Brazilian cut, or this is an Israeli cut, and we can actually buy this. But this one looks like a native cut, meaning that it's from Africa. So what is important that we can actually leverage on that training institution by bringing experts from outside the country who have an international appeal in terms of the gemstone they're able to cut, so that they can teach our local people, pass that local knowledge. You know, we have what we call the South-to-South cooperation. The South-to-South cooperation is about transfer of technology, transfer of knowledge and skills and everything. We can leverage on that agreement with our Oriental brothers who are in in India and other parts of the world that side, who can help us to actually improve on the cutting of gemstones so that we can export this in large quantities to the international world and is acceptable in the international market. The Jews have been doing this from time immemorial. You can read the Bible, the book of Exodus chapter 31. It says that cutting of gemstones started as many years ago, and this has been passed from one generation to another, and that skill still remains within them. It's a skill set the world needs. They appeal to stones that are cut from that part of the world as opposed to what is coming from Africa.
Mr. Kalesha, the dollar gem exchange, is it functional? What's the status?
No, it's not. I think it, like I said, I wanted to avoid that one because there was a lot of politics attached to that, and it's not in existence. But of course, the government had said they don't want the gem exchange or the auction floors to be done by government. They wanted it to be in private hands. So, of course, you know, when we say private hands, everybody wants the Sub-Sahara. There was somebody who was one of the premises. And maybe, let me say, why it failed was people felt like Kajam Grizzly, they've got all these, they are gemstones, they are emeralds, and you take it to a facility, which is just a building, and then you pay a certain percentage. Maybe the percentage was also too high. I don't know if they were asking for 5% after you sell your emeralds from there. So they felt uncomfortable, and Kajam continued auctioning at Intercontinental. Grizzly have got their own facility in Kitwe, built and with the auction facilities. So maybe that's why it cannot work.
So as we conclude this discussion, gentlemen, it seems that we still have a lot of confusion in this sector. There's no proper policy to make the industry. You have challenges on your capital costs of exploration and mining. Then you're talking about these taxes. The two questions. What then would be your appeal or proposal to government? Because they're saying the suspension of this 15% export duty means that you as precious stone miners will now be able to compete, properly globally. Is this suspension an answer to all your problems?
Well, not to all the problems, but partly, because Costa, truthfully speaking, if they did not make that decision to remove off that 15%, you would never have seen any investor coming into the country, because we were now, after the 15%, we were rated the highest tax country in the world. Even with the removal of 15%, for small scale, it remains at 10%. We are still the highest in the region and global. You can do that research. So we would have distracted investors from coming, because any investor who wants to go, even locally, if you want to venture into a business and you find that the risks are just too high, you don't go into that. But every investor, when coming to invest into the mining, they would ask, what are the taxes that are paid? When they see that the tax what is high, they won't come and invest. So it's not the answer to all of our problems, but at least it has answered a bit of it. At small scale level, what we would like to have to see is government now start looking at, okay, we have these big guys who also feel that they are overtaxed, but they are paying the minimum royalty. I mentioned the figure of 7 billion here that went from 2015 to date, that went into national coffers. Now, can you imagine if all these other small-scale miners in my area in Lufwanyama, we have 300 plus. If we've been negotiating with government to Aumagate, can we Aumagate, but they have failed to find so far an investor that will take up maybe 20 of these miners, come together to start up. Once we do that, government should now start investing like the Tanzania scenario. Let's bring in cold drilling machines, let's bring in equipment for them. All that money in the Zambian hands will remain in the country, because when we sell, I'll have my money in my account, the taxes I'll pay will remain, everything would have to be here. So and when we are contributing to what Grizzly is paying, Kajam is paying, and we're also paying in, the revenue base will go up. I think that was the issue at...
In 2 minutes, you say you've not been given opportunity to get audience with the president. Looking at that camera, what would you be telling the president?
I think Mr. President needs to understand and know that we have different views from what the technocrats have, and the way we look at the sector and the way they look at it is different. And the head of state, who is the father of the country, is able to understand and say, okay, this is what these people want. Let me see. Because whatever the president says becomes policy. So some things that will speak with Mr. President will be turned into policy, and some things maybe he is able to, is a marketer, is able to attract some investors and say, I want you to work with the small-scale miners in the country. Then we'll start from there.
Your message, what proposals are you making through this platform? What would you want this government, through the president, to do for the sector?
Number one, we would want the government to create a fund that we deliberately we're able to tap in as small-scale miners, to be able to finance our operations. I know it's a far-fetched dream, but we can start from somewhere. Well, the investors who are coming into the country are tapping into what I call sovereign wealth funds from their countries. The low interest rates of the money they borrow to come and push into the mining is what pushes them ahead to actually get involved in the mining sector. For Zambia, we require that government can look at a deliberate policy to ensure that we have a funding mechanism, we have a funding line. I know it's not easy with the current commercial banks in terms of their exorbitant and prohibitive interest rates in terms of accessing the loans, but there must be a deliberate policy by government to ensure that we provide a fund that will ensure that we have resources channeled to the small-scale miners to access working capital so they can actually invest into machinery and be able to realize value out of these mines. At the end of the day, it's job creation. So many people outside the work environment are able to be brought in because there is productivity and there's activity going on in the mining sector.
Mr. Fabian Cheru, Information and Publicity Secretary for the Federation of Small-Scale Miners Association of Zambia, thank you so much for coming through. Also, thank you to Mr. Victor Kalesha, the President, Emerald and Semi-Precious Stones Mining Association.
But also, I would like to extend an invitation to you, because you are very highlighted, you like research. Please visit the Emerald area. We can facilitate, right? To tell us when you are ready to come. Do a documentary for yourself so that when next time we sit here, you are the one that will be speaking, maybe even on behalf of the sector. We want you to come and appreciate what really goes on as an investigation. If you agree to our invitation, we will talk with our colleagues and in the sector and say, let's facilitate as Federation for Small-Scale Miners, as Emerald Association, let's facilitate for Diamond TV to come and do their own investigative journalism. Not that we'll tell you what to report. You just ask us questions on site and then we'll start from there.
Challenge accepted. Thank you so much. That wraps up this evening's edition of Costa. We've been discussing the suspension of export tax on precious stones and metals, plus other related issues surrounding policy inconsistencies and the challenges that faces the sector around exploration, mining, and issues of the tax components. And of course, my guests have been the President of the Emerald Semi-Precious Stones Mining Association of Zambia, as well as the Information and Publicity Secretary of the Federation of Small-Scale Miners Association of Zambia. Remember to catch the live stream or repeat stream of this episode on Facebook, Diamond TV Online, as well as Diamond Media Zambia. Good night and God bless.